The year is 867. It's a time of turmoil in Europe, a troubled continent loosely held together by distant dreams of Roman grandeur. The shattered Carling kingdoms vie for a dominant position in the Catholic world, while the Norsemen are readying themselves to usher in the era of Vikings. To the south, fearsome invaders from the Orient threaten the very heartland of Catholicism, while Byzantium keeps its Roman heritage in isolation to the east. Many ambitious counts, dukes and kings from all corners of Europe seek to leave their mark on the continent, through conquest and diplomacy, through marriage and subjugation. Both in success and failure they write this, our history. As so often in history, one towers above his peers. As Viking bands reach the coasts of Western Europe and the Baltic, terrorizing Christians and pagans alike with their cunning and merciless raiding tactics, Harold Tanglehair of the Yngling family would be the first to conquer a true Viking kingdom on foreign shores, and forever go down in history to inspire his people. His series of conquests begins with the successful invasion of Normandy in the year 888. The Carling kingdoms were engaged in an endless series of succession wars against each other and their subjects. While none of the successor kingdoms was truly able to reclaim the Carling Empire, the near constant infighting between the Catholics allowed Harold to secure a swift victory against the kingdom of West Francia in Normandy. But Harold's conquests were far from over. In 893, only 5 years after the successful invasion of Normandy, Harold set his eyes on bigger game, the fractioned petty kingdoms of England. Again, conquest was swift, and the Catholic world watched in terror as the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms fell to the fearsome Asatru warriors. Little did Harold know he would set off a chain of events that would lead to the First Crusade. In 894, Pope Sylvester called all able-bodied Christians to unite under the banner of the cross and repel the pagans from England. For the first time since the death of Charlemagne, the Catholic kingdoms united in an attempt to recover the important pilgrimage site of Canterbury that had fallen into Harold's hands. But word of the army of the cross reached not only the ears of the Carling kings, but also the Asatru chieftains. More than willing to lay down their lives in combat, in honor of the Asatru gods Thor and Odin, many of them gathered their war bands to come to Harold's aid. Religious zealots on both sides proclaimed victory was all but assured thanks to the divine purpose of the war. When the first Crusader armies reached Normandy in 896, many of the problems the Catholics would face throughout the war became apparent immediately. While some of the Crusader armies went to siege Harold's keep in Normandy, others joined an invasion of Kent. Disorganized and shattered, the Crusaders fell prey and were slaughtered by the Viking armies of Harold. Thousands died, but the crusade was not yet over. Threatened by constant Viking raids, the Duke of Connacht seized the opportunity to convert to Catholicism and joined the crusade against Harold's dangerously close Norseman realm. Fortune finally seemed to turn the Catholics' way when Harold himself was captured in the siege of Rouen in the year 900. The Catholics thought the war won, but Harold refused to surrender. Sure that the Viking armies would disband with the death of the sonless Harold, the Duke of Catalonia executed Harold publicly. But instead of disbanding, hearing of the unjust beheading of the figurehead only strengthened the resolve of the Norsemen. Harold's daughter Elvar followed him on the throne at the mere age of 5. Enraged by Harold's beheading, the warband of the family Snorson started raiding the coastal capitals of Catholic houses to do unto them what they had done unto Harold's house. While Vikings besieged castle after castle in West Francia, the Duke of Connacht brought the crusade back onto the British Isles. After initial successes in the year 903, the first successful landing of Crusader armies happened in Northumberland, coming to the aid of the Duke of Connacht. Viking armies scrambled home to defend England from the Crusaders, and eventually the two armies met in 905 in the Battle of Leicester. Once more, the disorganized armies of the Cross were defeated due to their inability to collaborate. While the crusade would formally still drag on for another 5 years, with the Battle of Leicester, the defeat of Catholicism was all but inevitable. After 10 long years, great sacrifices and personal loss, the Crusaders were tired and wanted to return to their realms to deal with their affairs at home. The last strong Crusader presence on the English Isles was shattered in the Battle of Warwickshire in 907. After 15 long years, the crusade ended in 910, when the newly proclaimed King of Ireland ceased the last Christian efforts to take control of the English mainland. The First Crusade, often referred to as the Crusade of the Broken Cross, would go on to become one of the most influential events in the histories of both sides. While the north of England would spend centuries in suspicion of the Catholics from the European mainland, fearing another attempted invasion of their island, the Catholic kings and counts had come home from the crusade disillusioned. If God was truly on their side, how were the Crusader armies defeated so decisively? Many started to question the word of the Pope, all the more since a Muslim invasion from the south had managed to capture Rome in the absence of the Vatican troops. For centuries, the kings of Europe would often rather deal with affairs at home than join a crusade for a distant land, passing down the stories of the 15 years of war and loss for no gain. With the crusade and Rome lost, heresies against the Pope gaining in strength across Europe, and pagans closing in on the Catholic world from all sides, it seemed Catholicism was on the brink of collapse. But while the Catholics and as such were fighting in the First Crusade, new powers rose to the east. Just like Western Europe, the Baltics were the target of near-constant Viking invasions, while for the south the Magyar people were trying to make a new home in the Kingdom of Hungary. Both these people would go through hardship and make unlikely allies along the way. Both would go on to fight for the right to exist and their claim to greatness. They are the peoples of the East. Storm clouds were gathering over the realms of the Baltic coast. The peoples of the Baltics had no great kings to unite them against the Viking invaders, nor a pope to call for a crusade. The tribal chieftains were locked in a web of alliances and blood feuds that often lasted generations. While they were used to repelling the advances of the Catholics to the west, the Viking raids brought unique difficulties with them. The Norsemen seemed unstoppable, rowing up the rivers of Eastern Europe, raiding and ransacking, then disappearing back onto the water. What had previously been the Eastern people's biggest defensive advantage now turned against them: the geography of their lands. While the peoples of the Baltic struggled with these invaders from the north, the Magyar people faced a threat of a different kind. A nomadic people that just recently settled in the Pannonian lowlands, they had no ties of family or religion to the kingdoms of Europe. Surrounded by enemies, their newfound kingdom was under constant threat. But worse still, these mighty horsemen from the eastern steppes had a long tradition of rule by strength. Only the strongest and most cunning, those who would never step down from a challenge, were seen fit to rule. Constant infighting to prove oneself worthy and the pose of the competition were the result. Ready to use the king's every weak moment to win the throne oneself, the ununified chieftains of the Magyar people were no match for the might of the slumbering Byzantine Empire to the south. And the slumbering empire had awoken. Threatened by the Bulgar people on its northern border, the Byzantine Empire had adopted a new approach of frontier pacification and settling, to ward off the pillaging tribes further north. As successful border posts and fortifications along the Danube managed to secure peace for the Byzantine core lands in Greece, the strategy was eagerly continued, and soon the empire crossed the Danube, seized control of Wallachia, and extended its reach to the lands of the vulnerable Magyar. And so both the peoples of the Baltics and the Magyar faced a seemingly insurmountable foe. Both were disorganized and had no great leader to unite them, yet their fates would differ greatly. Founded in their unique traditions and beliefs, both peoples would find their own way forward. The resurgence of the Baltic tribes began in an unlikely place, the village of Rana, a place more exposed to Viking raids than most. Rana was a unique place at its time. To the Christians of Europe, it would have been an unimportant tribal hold at the Baltic coast, but it was a place of great cultural exchange. It allowed the ideas and people of three major cultures in the region to meet. The town was both a sacred site to the Slavic pagans of Poland and Bohemia, as well as the Vitalists of the Baltics. Located at the northernmost tip of Pomerania, it also came into earlier and more frequent contact with the Vikings than any other place in the Baltics. Here, 3 generations of kings, would each guide their people in a unique way, would be born. First, King Tobias, who came to be chief of Rana in 867. Against the wishes of many, who had wanted to seek refuge with the Christian proselytizers, King Tobias would reaffirm their cultural and religious beliefs against all odds. The Giant of Rana was an able-bodied fighter and admired by many for his tactical prowess. His realm, the High Chiefdom of Wallachia, was under constant threat from the north and southwest. It was not until the First Crusade, when both the Vikings and Catholics were off to fight in England, that he was able to subdue the chieftains to the east and proclaim himself King of Pomerania. Tobias proclaimed the old feuds over, and a new age for the people of the Baltics. Against all odds, his vassals proved loyal, as he rigorously defended them against the Viking invasions from the north, earning him the title Defender of Rod. His son, King Vladislav, would continue to earn his vassals' loyalty by fending off the invaders from the north, but more than that, he continued his father's journey of bringing together the Slavic pagans and Vitalists. Under his stewardship, all the enemies started to cooperate, the wild was tamed and roads were built. He brought his people into the feudal age and united them in an unlikely fashion, earning him the title of Defender of Divas. But it was not until his son, King Vladislav II, that this new state was formalized. A scholar, he united the beliefs of the Slavic pagans and the Vitalists and created a new religious tradition based in both those heritages. The final resistance to the new waves was crushed, and by the end of King Vladislav II's rule, Pomerania was a powerful and united kingdom, towering above its tribal peers, and even the Catholic kings of East Francia and Bavaria. Through perseverance, and by taking brave steps into an unknown future, the people of Pomerania had saved their cultural and religious legacy, and withstood the pressures from within and without. The Magyar never managed to unite in a similar way, and year after year the aggressive settlement policy of the Byzantine Empire robbed them of more lands. One expelled Magyar tribe would go on a daring adventure in the spirit of its nomadic ancestry and find a new home in a faraway land. They would go on to become an important power on Iberia for centuries, benefiting from and aiding the ascendancy of Serkland. This Norsen clan had made a name for itself in the First Crusade, when they looted the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. But they had gained more than gold from foreign shores and fame at home. Heriolf, who had led the raiding parties into Sardinia and Italy, had come home with tales of a land he called Serkland. He was talking about the riches of the Muslim people of Iberia and the Maghreb. Inspired by the deeds of Harold, he dreamed of invading these shores and claiming a kingdom of his own. Many called these ambitions foolish. The Hachemid Empire was far more united and fielded stronger armies than the fractured kingdoms of Europe. Heriolf never saw his dreams fulfilled. He died in battle during the First Crusade, but his dream lived on. His son, Skjold, grew up with his father's tales of Serkland and was determined to travel to this fabled realm. His expedition to the west started with a warband of merely 1,000 warriors. Unlikely as it may seem, it changed the world forever. After stops in Brittany and Navarra, the warband had grown in size and repute. They sailed for their final destination, the Maghreb. In 919, Skjold reached the fabled lands his father had visited almost 20 years earlier. The warband landed near Marrakesh and quickly took the city and surrounding lands, proclaiming a new Jarldom for themselves. 20 years of almost constant warfare followed. As news spread, new settlers from the homeland arrived by the day to make the Maghreb their new home. With them, they brought the Norse culture and the Asatru religion. As the native Berbers tried to defend themselves, constant conflict erupted throughout the Viking realm. Despite this, the relentless Vikings quickly drove the Berbers deeper and deeper into the mountainous land, occupying and settling the coast with incredible speed. But soon they pushed further and further into the Berber lands until they eventually established de facto rule over the western Maghreb. To solidify these gains, Skjold proclaimed himself King of Serkland in 938. But the young kingdom was still in danger of being pushed out by its Muslim neighbors. The powerful Hachemid Empire to the north controlled almost all of Iberia. As Viking raids of its coast became more and more common, it became clear that confrontation was unavoidable. Skirmishes between the two realms became more frequent and violent. Skjold himself was killed in battle against the Hachemid army in 942. His son Sigurd would be the one to see the conflict to its end. In 965, the Hachemid Empire mobilized its armies to strike south at the heartland of Sigurd's realm. The Viking king found himself outnumbered and with less coin to spend than his enemy. Against the warnings of his generals, he would take a daring approach. He circumvented the Hachemid armies and landed on the southern shores of Iberia, where he started to set the cities and fortresses of the Hachemid ablaze in stunning speed. It was here that he met Geza and his tribe of Magyar, who fled from the Pannonian steppes in hopes of finding a new home. The two became friends and Geza pledged his loyalty and tribesmen to Sigurd's crown. When the Hachemid army returned to face Sigurd, it was ambushed and slaughtered by the well-prepared Vikings and their Magyar allies. The war that nearly wiped Serkland from the map was turned into its biggest victory. The Hachemid resistance quickly disbanded as powerful vassals of the Hachemid Emperor soon turned on him after the defeat. The Viking armies stayed in southern Iberia, claiming the lands almost unopposed. In friendship and appreciation, the Magyar were granted vast lands of their own and would live to see a resurgence of their culture in their new Iberian home. And so, by 975, Serkland had become the dominant power of the region, stretching from the southern ends of the Sahara Desert to the hills of Toledo. Yet, much in Europe remained undecided. The King of England would still need to face the powerful Catholic kingdoms of Ireland and Scotland for its right to a Viking realm on the British Isles. The warriors of Sorkland would need to face a new and greater challenge, managing an empire. Will they manage this burden, or will they fall prey to internal instabilities and a host of enemies at their borders? And what of Catholicism? Shattered in the First Crusade and threatened by enemies from within and without, what hope did the papacy that was driven from Rome have? Pope Innocentius II, also known as the Beautiful Pope, had ambitious plans for the resurgence of his institution. But would the Catholic kings follow suit? Like and subscribe to find out in the next episode of The Grand Campaign.